thank you all for being here. This is live from Northwoods and Waters. This is our March issue, so thank you for coming. We are Northwoods and Waters of the St. Croix Heritage Area, and we promote the natural, cultural, and historic resources of the St. Croix River Watershed. But the watershed covers a big swath of land, 2 states, 4 sovereign nations, 7,700 square miles, 18 counties, and 114 zip codes. So you know that means a lot of people in a lot of places. 12,000 years of human history and modern history like we're going to see today. So what is Northwoods and Waters? What are we trying to do? Trying to create better economic opportunities to help uplift people in rural areas and help them have agency in what they're doing and, you know, having a future in this world and having the choice in that. We're trying to connect the region. So that's everything from historical, cultural, and natural resources. We've all got a lot, and sharing it makes it all better. Increasing awareness and understanding of our heritage and stories and the resources. So that's education of what's going on to the region's residents, and also to promote interpretation of the region for visitors, both in the rest of the United States, in the Midwest, and internationally. So our goal is to put national in our name. Become a national heritage area requires a literal act of Congress. So we need people like you, everybody on this call. We need the legislators, we need Congress people, and we need more awareness. So help us get our name, help us get national in our name. So without further ado, today we're going to be talking about the Big Read, and with us is Heather Rutledge. Would you like to introduce the rest of the people, the poets of place?
Sure. Yeah, I'll be introducing 4 of the poets of place, poets who were selected as part of this year's NEA Big Read, and they've each joined us today to read a couple of their pieces. But I have some other things to start with.
Okay, great. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can take over.
All right. So today I am going to start by reading ArtReach's land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that ArtReach St. Croix occupies land that is the ancestral home of the Wapakuta people and the larger Oshaty-Shakoween Seven Fires Council Alliance of Dakota tribes. The Dakota people are here and maintain deep connections to this land and its stories despite genocide and forced relocation. ArtReach St. Croix will build and strengthen relationships with Indigenous people who currently or in the future call the St. Croix Valley home. ArtReach looks to amplify artists' voices and draws on the arts to connect communities to their stories and to each other. So that is a new part of ArtReach's programs and acknowledges the people who, and really it's focused on this parcel, this place that ArtReach calls our home base in Stillwater. Generally, ArtReach works with artists and arts organizations from Taylor's Falls and St. Croix Falls to the confluence with the Mississippi at Hastings and Prescott. So that's where the geography is that I work in. And of course, ArtReach has been a partner with Northwoods and Waters since the beginning. And now as we share the common event database, St. Croix Splash and Northwoods and Waters links. So that's another point of connection. And tonight I've been invited to talk about the Big Read in the St. Croix Valley 2022. And as you saw from Sashi's slide, we are building, or we have built, a month of programming around U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo, and specifically her book of poetry, An American Sunrise. So I'm going to tell you more about the programs that are coming up and more about the work that we do to connect people to great literature through this kind of common book program. And I'm going to tell you some of the background about why the National Endowment for the Arts chooses to use great literature and build something like the Big Read in 70 different communities as a way to connect people, not just to the books, but to stories and to each other through the arts. First, I wanted to read an excerpt from Joy Harjo's recent memoir called A Poet Warrior. And it was this poem, and I heard it on Terry Gross's Fresh Air, actually, from Joy Harjo's mouth. So I definitely recommend listening to Joy Harjo speak these words rather than me, but tonight you get me. And it really expresses why, as part of this year's Big Read, we built a program called Poets of Place. And I'm going to be introducing 4 of the Poets of Place and asking them to share some readings. And it is Joy Harjo's format and her selection of poetry and memoir that really grounds this year's Big Read in poetry. Poet Warrior reached for a gun. She was given a paintbrush, a saxophone, a pen. These will be your instruments of power, the old one said. Though the gun gleamed and pranced as a tool of takeover by governments, even as it danced through the imaginations of revolutionaries as the perfect tool for social change. Do not be fooled, they told her. Violence might be louder, tougher, and is often good looking. The power of insight and compassion is fiercely humble and helpful. Be ready for what the story of your age demands. You will be tested. There will be jealousy, envy. But the most difficult enemies will be from your closest circle, even your family. You must act in a manner that will cause no harm to anyone 7 generations back or forward. And I was taught by, we read a lot of poetry at ArtReach. We start and end board meetings with poetry, and that goes back to before I became the director. But one board member told me to always read a piece of it twice. So I'm going to tell you, listen. Poet Warrior reached for a gun. She was given a paintbrush, a saxophone, a pen. These will be your instruments of power. So, as I've already said, I'm going to be telling you more about the Big Read. And first, I want to introduce River Urke. And River, you can unmute yourself and share one of your poems. And then we will go to Heidi to share one
poem. Okay. Good evening, everyone. This poem actually has 2 Ojibwe words in it. So the first one is Manoman, which means wild rice. And the second is a Asema, which means tobacco or prayer tobacco. My first harvest began on the tale of a dream, with frames of another time that became mine. That day we cruised north in our old Chevy, prepared to rice all day. In a cloud of dust, we arrived upon the lake we sought, bursting with Manoman, standing tall and proud. You unload the canoe, the gear, and then carry me with my compromised legs down to the shore. I offer a Sema, totally ready to prove to all, but most importantly, to myself, I can do this. With one push, we're off into a maze of reeds, swaying in the wind, releasing aromas surrounding my every cell. Quickly you find your rhythm. As we glide between your every pole, I bend reeds down and knock the rice free as we go deeper into the rice bed. Breathing in traditions, I feel the harvest within as I gather monomen like my ancestors. An experience of a lifetime on a day of breathtaking beauty. Thank you.
Thank you, River. Thank you so much. Yay. So, and River, I really appreciate your sharing, and that was beautiful. And I regret that I didn't introduce you properly. So let me just tell everybody a little bit about you. This will be perfect segue. So River, as you have seen or heard, has the heart of a poet and the eyes of an artist. So River also does visual arts. Currently, she resides in River Falls. River reflects the principles she lives by, where imperfection is beauty, nature is appreciated, and knowledge is gold. Her work is heavily influenced by her battles with multiple sclerosis and her native blood. And she is the author of 2 chapbooks, a nonfiction piece as well, and hosts monthly literary events online. So River, later you can tell people about your monthly events too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And you'll share another poem later.
Mhm.
So Heidi Barr is next. Heidi lives in Lindstrom and works as a wellness coach and is the author of several books of nonfiction. She is hosting a book launch for her next poetry collection, Slouching Towards Radiance, on May 5th at ArtReach in Stillwater. So Heidi, you want to share a piece?
I would be happy to. It's lovely to be here with you all. And I just want to let you know I'm right next to a grandfather clock, so it might chime on the 15-minute mark.
Ooh.
Isn't that timing always how it goes? So I'll pause if that happens. This poem is called Belonging. If you can only be sure of one thing, be sure of how your presence here on earth is essential. Nothing would be the same if your thread wasn't woven deep into this great tapestry, woven over millennia by the synergies that make life possible on this fair planet. Earth, fire, water, air meet in space and across time to tell the story of your worth, that you matter. And that's the part of the story to focus on. Hard days will still be hard, but you are woven deep into something bigger than yourself, something that wouldn't exist if your thread wasn't here, something that always remains true, even if those hard days stack up. The world may be an uncertain place, but your place in it isn't. You matter. Your place is here.
Thank you so much, Heidi. I really appreciate it. I am feeling it. I'm feeling it. So I'm going to just continue with the Poets of Place and ask Lee and then Mike to each share a piece. And then I'll talk more about the Big Read. I'm liking this. So Lee, you're going to be next. I'll just introduce you. Lee Kisling is a longtime resident of Hudson. He's a retired engineer of railroad signal systems and a working poet. Lee graduated from Hamlin in 2014 with a degree in creative writing. He published a novel, The Fool's War, a chapbook of poetry titled The Lemon Bars of Parnassus, and Add to Cart, a book of small poems. So Lee.
Well, hello everyone. Those poems were both so good. I'm almost speechless, but I will read you this poem called Not the Same Old Song and Dance. Because so much of our heritage and our identity involves food and the securing of food and so on. So that's what really inspired this, and some reading I had done. Not the same old song and dance. A Blackfoot Indian legend tells that the buffalo taught a maiden how to sing and dance in order to restore to life year after year the buffalo who were killed. This was a conception that the animals were willing to be killed, that there was a mystical covenant between the animal world and the humans, that it was sacred and required ceremony, singing and dancing. In the songs, the people talked to the animals. In the stories, the people married the animals. At some point, getting the songs and dances exactly right was the only way to keep the magic going. I have spoken of this to the cereal and canned goods at the grocery. I've told it to the bread in their plastic bags. I've whispered to the apples and to the cheese. I've prayed in front of the deli counter. I have invented a small dance which, until recently, no one could see. Heel, toe, slide left, spin around, change foot, and repeat. I softly sing, and here I'm going to leave out a little song because it's in Ojibwa and I'm not that fresh with it. So until recently, no one could see, etc. Close eyes, repeat, move to the next aisle. I awaken the food and the fathers and mothers of the food. I caress the jars. I especially like to shake the pasta, rub the melons, praise the butter, and now they've asked me to leave.
Thank you, Lee. That was great.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next up is Mike Farrecki. When not in Florida, Mike lives on the bluffs near Osceola, Wisconsin, overlooking the St. Croix. He received a bachelor's in English, a master's in philosophy, and then spent 40 years practicing law. He started writing poetry when he semi-retired almost 10 years ago. So Mike, please unmute and share a piece with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Heather, and hi all. And yeah, very tough act to follow. This poem is titled With Our Words. With our words, we try to cast a net over the stars. We can do nothing else. So real this evening's fragrance of Japanese lilacs, the sop of dewed grass under our bare feet. We taste the rising mist. We call out the fireflies that pinpoint this rural road. You must lean towards becoming, you say. When you see this way, you uncover the bloom inside the seed, the God in the ageless child. Sometimes I do lean. Sometimes I pretend not to hear that other becoming, that quiet, deniable angel, Gabriel, messaging the end of times. A quantum is me. Sometimes I pass over beginnings also. The sun trapped inside the dawn mist above the cornfield. The monarch caterpillars raised inside bins by our granddaughters. I want to say we are hardly young. Our swords are not wooden. Our escapades not riskless, not orchestrated by those early imaginings when we could not imagine loss or pain or cruelty or death. Until we can, and we carry that knowing with us always. Just some stars are seen. Fewer seeds break the baked earth's crust. Only some young will be cared for.
Oh, wow.
Thank you, Mike. You know, we did not plan this, but Mike, that is the most beautiful transition to something that I want to show next. I could not have planned it better. Thank you for that poem. So, as I mentioned, the Big Read starts. The Big Read is a program of the National Endowment for the Arts. Each year, 60 to 70 communities in the nation are awarded a very competitive grant to build programs around a common book. So first, a lot of people ask me how we pick the book. And the Big Read program, the NEA, actually puts out anywhere from 5 to 30 titles for people to pick from. ArtReach and our partners have secured 8 grants, consecutive grants now. So we've been doing the Big Read since 2015. And in fact, we have been part of literary arts programming, similar literary arts programming, since even before we secured the Big Read. The reason that I bring this up is that the Big Read is really a collaborative program. It is spearheaded by ArtReach in that I'm the grant writer, but the ideas for the programs come from a really broad array of library partners, cross-sector partners, and by that I mean like scientists or environmental groups or individual artists. And this year I worked hand in hand with 2 amazing artists, Jim Denemy and Diane Wilson. They were instrumental in helping connect ArtReach and the Big Read Committee to just amazing people to help bring to life the poetry of Joy Harjo. So many of you may have heard that Jim Denemy passed away recently after receiving a recent diagnosis. And he, before his death, asked his gallery owner, Todd Boakley, to help ArtReach make the solo exhibition of his work happen as planned. So I'm going to share my screen and just have an opportunity to introduce you to Jim Denemy. He made his home in Scandia, and he was a McKnight Distinguished Artist, and that's where this photo is from. His work is often narrative paintings, definitely relating to outsider art, and often pertain to Native American issues and identity. And his work is often very political and biting and humor-filled and really powerful. And his work is often found in collections like at NEA or the Walker, the Denver Art Museum, and the Idle York Museum in Indianapolis. So we are thrilled that he asked Todd Boakley to continue his solo exhibition as part of the NEA Big Read, and that will go on view and open at ArtReach's gallery in Stillwater on March 31st, the very first event of this year's Big Read. So I definitely invite you to, if you want to come to the opening, registration is required, but then gallery hours are open and free to the public. And his show is on view through May 7th. So definitely come and see Jim Denemy's work. His wife, Diane Wilson, is an author and has a recent book, The Seed Keeper. Her program is canceled for the Big Read, but she's a local writer and is very active and will, and I just wanted to acknowledge the two of them were just amazing partners in this year's Big Read. So next program that, you know, I think of the Big Read as like one blockbuster program after another. Jim Rock will be at Bellwyn Conservancy on April 4th. And Jim Rock is an astronomer and the director of the planetarium at University of Minnesota Duluth, but he is also a archaeoastronomer or an ethnoastronomer, and he teaches about indigenous cosmology and indigenous constellations. So I have actually a video that he shared with me. You can find it on YouTube. That was developed, I think, through the Minnesota History Center, but it has the acknowledgements at the end. But I'm going to share my screen again and share a video from Jim Rock.
Hamitakapi, Chandewashte na pech Yusapido, Ocheti Shakoing Oyate Himataha, Wamdi Hayetu Imakiapido, Damakota, Sisituan, Dakota Himata. Hello, my relatives. I speak to you today with a glad heart. Offer you my hand. My dad was Sisituan Dakota of the 7 Starfire Nations, Ocheti Shakoing Oyate. My name is Jim Rock in English, Wamdi Hayetu, and Dakota Ya. I was born at Imanija Ska Ed Himachage. I was born at St. Paul, at a near place called Wakantipi, the cave in which we have the drawings that tell something of our cosmic origins. So what I do is in a planetarium. I was, trained in Western science, but always kept our own ways of thinking here, and the two legs have really come together well in that the word nucleosynthesis, it just means that atoms are made in stars. And we've always said we come from the stars, and to the stars we return. We come from the earth, and to the earth we return. The iron in our blood, the carbon in our body had to come from a sun before this sun. So we're recycled stardust. Star stuff are us, I like to say. The Milky Way is like a river, not just any river, but Hahawakpa, or Wakpatanka, Wakpahaska, the big long river, the river of the waterfalls. We find burial mounds near rivers. It's very intentional. It's not random. Our elders, those that have passed on, deserve the highest place near water to go back up to the stars, a place of honor, by the water that flows. Chang, Changwakang, Wakachang, the sacred tree, Sundance tree. The cottonwood tree is filled with stars. That tree full of stars connects between sky and earth. Along rivers, it likes its feet wet, its roots. It's a bridge between the river down here with sparkling lights on it and the sparkling stars above. The Wanagi Tachanku, the spirit road. It's the road of spirits that we come from and go back to. And we need to be living in a good way so that we go back to that place we come from with integrity, with generosity.
Thank you so much for letting me share that. And you can see what I mean, Mike, how that was an interesting segue from your poem to Jim Rock's video. So Jim Rock will, like I said, will be at Bellwyn. One of the reasons that he wants to be at Bellwyn is because there's some important mounds that used to be in Bellwyn, or not in Bellwyn, in Afton along the river. Also, Bellwyn has an observatory. And so if the weather permits, they're going to open the observatory and point out some of the constellations that Jim will be teaching us about on the 4th. So other highlights from this year's Big Read include Anton Troyer, who is the author of Everything You Wanted to Know About Indians, but Were Afraid to Ask. He's a professor at in Bemidji, and he is in 2018, he was named Guardian of Culture and Lifeways by the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums. So he is a really dynamic speaker, and that's going to be an online event. And again, all of this is free. So I definitely recommend signing up for Anton Troyer's webinar. And that's April 13th in partnership with a bunch of libraries and also Northwoods and Waters Heritage Area of the St. Croix. So yay. The next week is an event with Joy Harjo. Joy Harjo is the U.S. Poet Laureate, and she's a writer from the Muscogee Creek Nation. So she's actually been the U.S. Poet Laureate 3 terms now, I think partially because one of her terms was interrupted by a pandemic. And she has a big project about mapping Native voices. That's part of her work as the Poet Laureate through the Library of Congress. And I think when it comes to Joy's work, An American Sunrise, the book is a very hopeful book. It's a book of, and it's also kind of a narrative book. It has a lot of history in it, a lot of journeys through history and through geographies as she goes back to places where her ancestors were from before the Trail of Tears. And one of the reasons that I love this book now is that she talks about healing and through literature and just cultural healing, intergenerational and cultural healing. On the front of the Big Read brochure this year, we put a quote from Joy: "America has a broken heart and poetry can help heal it." So please feel free to go to your local library. We stock a ton of American Sunrise books and other books by Joy Harjo during the Big Read, and they're available as read and release copies, which means you grab one, read it, and then pass it on to your friend and get more people involved that way. Finally, well, not finally, but the next big blockbuster program is Dr. Brenda Child, who will be in Marine on St. Croix at Village Hall on the 21st. And the reason we connected with Dr. Child is because her scholarship is about the fact that the jingle dress dance that many of you are familiar with, and you have probably seen, the jingle dress was actually developed post the 1918-1919 flu pandemic. It was developed as a healing tradition in the Ojibwe communities of the upper Midwest. And then it's actually been shared through the powwow circuit and is something that it shows up all over as a popular dress and a popular dance. And so anyway, Dr. Child will be here to tell us more about the history of that. And I think it's just super interesting to think about how art and dance and healing traditions can connect. And out of this pandemic, I wonder what kinds of traditions we'll have that we can look back and see them emerge from this time. So this seems like a good time to invite our poets of place to each share another poem. The poets of place are actually developing a chapbook that will be published, and the launch party will be at the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway Visitor Center on April 27th. So that's like right near the end of the month. It's a great way to celebrate the big read. And I think this time we're going to go in reverse order. Were you ready for that, Mike? So Mike, if you would unmute yourself and share another piece, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. This one's titled The Small Trimmer. Grief is now a painter. It shades in a starker outline, a red around the red on prairie grass that flares and waves across the ridge. A white covers the white on tundra swans funneled down river between rust-brown granite bluffs. At times you submerged me, but more and more this world submerges you. No, it's cut open by you. You, disguised as the wind burrowing sound into trees, the open rifts of children laughing. This is how I carry you now, a small tremor just inside the rib cage. It drums out an urgent joy, greets this brazen pageant, and me, just me living on, surrounded by your colors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate it. So Lee, you're next. You want to unmute yourself and share another piece?
Okay, well, this poem's called The Book of Love. And it kind of joins together the idea of reading and libraries and books and love. The Book of Love. Did I tell you that I love you like an overdue library book? I can't remember if I told you that, but if I did, I know what you would say. What book? Then I would scramble to think of a title you definitely wouldn't recognize, like Love's Dark Passion, or Standing on the Shore of Desire, or Saturday Night on the Love Planet. Of course, these are not real books, though if they were, I might read them here in the cabin in the waist-high snow during the short gray days of winter, or the long cold nights deep beneath my heavy wool blankets. 2 porcupines have burrowed under the upturned rowboat. I can't remember if I told you that, but if I did, I know what you'd say.
Thank you, Lee.
Uh-huh.
I love it. I love hearing your delivery and the cadence of your voice, and the humor just comes through.
Thank you.
So Heidi, you have 4 minutes before your grandfather clock chimes.
I can make it. All right, this one is a poem for spring. Interpretations. One spring evening, you set aside the weight of the day to take a walk through brown woods, aching to be green. Grandfather maples, adolescent aspen, urgently unfolding tiny buds of promise. A promise you accept and carry gently, an offering to the next one who needs it. When the time is right, when the day is heavy, when the voice of the forest interprets the best way through.
Thank you so much. And River, would you like to share another piece, please?
Yes, I decided to change it up to be more, I don't know, so give me one that I have to pull. I'm not prepared like I am as much. So let's see, where is it? There it is, okay. spirit songs. In the shallows of a northern lake, a woman stands with drum in hand, feeding her wounded spirit with song. She beats to rhythms of drum, singing strength back into her bones, spreading seeds of courage across the marsh and up the hills of rolling folds. Her voice soars into the wind, down through the valley below. It glides by the willows and sweeps the grass and dance. Circling around, she stands beside her grandmother's and begins to heal with song, fading tomorrow's fears. Is it okay if I say something about up close? Yeah. The first Wednesday night of the month, I do a literary show on Zoom called Up Close, Meet the Poet Behind the Verse, and we introduce the person behind the poems. So I think if you look up our YouTube channel, Up Close Poets, it will direct you to where you will find this one. Is coming up very soon on the 6th. So thank you.
Thank you, River. Appreciate it. And thank you to all of the Poets of Place for joining us tonight and sharing some of your work. Yay! Thank you.
I want to
These will
say
be
thank you, Heather.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I just was thinking, these are your instruments of power, these words, right? So appreciate it. So there are other Big Read programs. There's a whole list of them on St. Croix Splash or on Northwoods and Waters links. But I thought that I would open it up in case anybody has any questions, or otherwise just leave these poems hanging in your thoughts for the evening. So if anybody has questions for me, I'm open to them.
Heather, hey,
Yeah.
thanks so much for hosting this night. See, I am curious about how, in general, the Big Read gets connected with school districts throughout the Valley.
So different years, the answer is, so one of the great things about the Big Read is that every year it's pretty different because the book is different. And so we really work with the themes of the book to build relevant programming. So for example, last year we worked around Kao Kalia Yang's The Late Homecomer, stories of Hmong refugees. And before that, The Lab Girl by Hope Jaron. So every year it's going to be pretty different. And sometimes we get more connected to young people and more intergenerational. Often our connection to the school districts is through our partner Story Arc. And that's true again this year. So Story Arc is a youth literary arts program, and they are hosting a call for poets, a call for poems. The call just went out and it's being distributed through all the school districts in the lower St. Croix Valley. And they have an online magazine called The Boom Site. They also have an online, it's called a graffiti wall, that is open to poets of all ages. So it's not just for young writers, but that's the way we're working with students around the Valley this year. And we're working more specifically with the Stillwater School District's Native American Parent Alliance and Native American Student Alliance. So thanks for that question.
Heather, and all the poets, thank you so much. We're just, I think, just so filled up from tonight. This has just been a wonderful program. And kudos to you and your planning team and everybody who has put together this Big Read phantasmagoria of poetry and connections to our Native American neighbors. It's fantastic what you have done. And I want to go to all of them. Where are we going to find the time?
That's the thing. It is a blockbuster month. And so don't have fear of being left out. Just come when you can and sign up when there's online options. And definitely make it to Jim Denomy's exhibit.
Mm-hmm.
Heather, you noted Joy Harjo's part of this, but there was no specific date or event.
Yeah. I'm sorry I didn't mention the date. It's Monday, April 18th. And there is an online option for that. And that is obviously that everything's built around that. And I highlighted the local artists, but yeah, April 18th, which is a Monday.
And where do we find the online connection and things like that?
Yeah, so the link that Sashi shared in the chat has that event among the others. Or you can go to ArtReachSt.org and find it that way too. So yeah.
Super, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, Carol.
Nice. Any other questions? I don't want to cut anybody off. Okay. Well, I'm just going to show a few more slides closing out this. Let's see, present if it wants to. Great. So join us next month on the 26th for another great presentation from Brian Finstad and Jonathan Moore on Wisconsin's 5 Mile Tower Fire. It'll potentially have some literary elements in it too, and so you don't want to miss that. And we want to highlight again the Anton Troyer event. Although all the events are fantastic, again, look in the chat, or you can just Google Big Read St. Croix. Everything comes up. There's even a nice page that goes straight to all the registration links. So one-stop shop, just click them all. But Anton Troyer, April 13th, it'll be online. There's a bunch of events happening for Earth Day. And go on to links, which we're going to talk about that more in the next slide. But just keep your eyes open for everything coming your way. Marty, do you want to say a few words on Earth Day's roots in the watershed?
Well, all of you Wisconsinites, and hopefully most of us from Minnesota, know that Senator Gaylord Nelson, who is the father of Earth Day, was born in Clear Lake, Wisconsin. And so we've claimed the whole watershed as home of Earth Day because we can. And we certainly celebrate and support anything that's happening in Clear Lake, but we also expand that out throughout the whole watershed and encourage people to celebrate Earth Day in whatever way they can. And so we'll be posting those activities on, you can go to either St. Croix or links, they're the same deal, but we are sequestering the ones around Earth Day on links. And so also the River Falls is having a great Earth Fest on April 24th, but there will be tons of events happening. And so along with everything that we have with the Big Read, we have Earth Day coming up. And so it's going to be a busy month.
Absolutely. And speaking of links, join our links. It's a free online platform to post all these events. And it's a great way to connect in the watershed for specific things like this. And it's the same, it's like a sister to St. Croix Splash. So very similar. You can see all of these things. We loved hearing everybody's stories. If you know a storyteller, if you are a storyteller, or if you want to find a storyteller, go on to northwoodsandwaters.org/storytellers. And in a few months, so not next month, but later after that, we're going to have another one of these live formats, but we're going to have an open mic. So if you have stories that you want to share, or poems or visual things, let us know. Reach out to our email. And this is the email right down here. Don't be shy. Reach out to us, talk to us. We have a Facebook and Instagram, and yeah, send us an email. Let us know what you think. Well, and that's everything I have to say. Any other questions? Any last words? Any remarks? Thank you all for your time, and especially thank you to Heather, and thank you to the Poets of Place. This is such a magical night, and we couldn't have done it without you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, have a good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.